The sun hung low over the desert, casting long shadows across the vast sands. The cliffs rose like silent guardians, their jagged edges glowing in shades of orange and red. Nico, a young explorer with a notebook in hand and a small backpack on his shoulders, stepped carefully over the uneven ground. He had traveled far from the cities, drawn by stories of the mysterious desert cliffs and the rare plants that grew only there. Every step filled him with excitement, but also a quiet nervousness. The desert was beautiful, but it could be unforgiving. Nico paused to catch his breath, brushing sweat from his forehead. He looked out over the endless expanse of sand and rock. The wind whispered through the cliffs, carrying with it a strange mixture of warmth and dust. The beauty of the desert took his breath away. He had seen mountains and forests, oceans and rivers, but nothing like this. The cliffs seemed alive, their red and gold faces glowing in the fading sunlight. As Nico set down his backpack, he noticed a movement in the distance. A figure stood on a nearby ridge, watching him. She was tall and calm, with long dark hair that moved gently in the wind. Her presence was quiet but strong. Myra, a local guide who knew the desert like the back of her hand, had noticed the newcomer hours ago. Most visitors were timid, afraid of the harsh environment, but Nico walked with curiosity and care. Myra felt a spark of interest. Who was this stranger, walking boldly into the desert at dusk? The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dry sand and distant flowers. Myra took a careful step closer, wanting to see him better, but not wanting to scare him. Nico, meanwhile, was examining a formation of rocks that jutted out from the cliff. He ran his fingers along the rough surface, jotting notes in his notebook. He was so focused that he didn't notice Myra approaching. "Hello," Myra said softly, her voice almost blending with the wind. Nico jumped slightly, turning to see her standing there. "I didn't mean to startle you," she added with a small smile. Nico straightened and smiled back, a little embarrassed. "Oh, hello. I didn't hear you come," he said. "I'm Nico. I'm here to study the cliffs and the plants around them." "I'm Myra," she replied. "I guide people in this area. The desert can be dangerous if you don't know it well. You're lucky to arrive before the night. It gets very cold once the sun goes down." Nico nodded, grateful for the advice. "Thank you. I wanted to see the cliffs before the sunset. I've read about them, but I wanted to experience them myself." His eyes wandered back to the horizon, where the sun painted the sky in streaks of orange, pink, and gold. Myra followed his gaze, her expression softening. "It's beautiful," she said quietly. "Many people come here looking for beauty, but few understand its power. The desert can teach you respect if you listen carefully." Nico felt a strange comfort in her words. There was something in her calm tone, in the way she moved with confidence, that made the desert feel less intimidating. "I hope I can learn from it, and maybe from you," he said, a small smile appearing on his face. The sun slipped lower, and shadows stretched long across the sand. Myra offered to help Nico set up his small camp before darkness fell. She showed him the safest spots, where the ground was stable and the wind less strong. Nico watched her work with admiration. She moved with ease and grace, familiar with every rock and dune. It was clear she belonged here, and he felt a growing respect for her. As they worked together, they exchanged small stories about their lives. Nico spoke of libraries, cities, and distant lands he had visited. Myra shared tales of the desert, its hidden caves, and the plants that survived in harsh conditions. Each story revealed a new side of them, and an unspoken bond began to form. By the time the fire was lit and the first stars appeared, the desert had grown cooler. The cliffs glowed faintly in the twilight, and the wind sang softly through the rocks. Nico and Myra sat near the fire, the warmth of the flames comforting against the evening chill. They didn't need to speak much, the shared silence felt full of understanding and curiosity. For Nico, the desert was no longer just a place to study. It was a place of mystery, beauty, and now, connection. And for Myra, the newcomer was no longer just another traveler. He was someone who noticed the desert, someone who moved with care and wonder. As the last light of day faded behind the cliffs, both of them felt the beginning of something new, something that would grow like the desert flowers, quietly, patiently, and beautifully. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, spilling golden light across the cliffs and sand. Nico woke to the soft sound of wind brushing against the rocks. He stretched and rubbed his eyes, still feeling the excitement of being in such a vast, untouched place. The fire from last night had burned low, leaving warm embers behind. Myra was already awake, moving quietly among the rocks, checking the small paths they would take today. "Good morning," Nico called softly, careful not to startle her. "Morning," Myra replied with a small smile. Her dark hair caught the sunlight, and her calm presence made Nico feel at ease. "Are you ready to explore?" Nico nodded eagerly. "Yes. I want to see the cliffs up close and maybe find some rare plants." Myra handed him a small water bottle. "Stay hydrated. The desert can trick you. You feel fine, but the sun can drain you quickly." As they began walking along a narrow path that led closer to the cliffs, the desert seemed alive with colors and sounds. Birds called from hidden ledges, and the wind carried the scent of dry earth and distant flowers. Nico stopped often to sketch rocks, plants, and formations in his notebook, asking Myra questions about the landscape. "You have a good eye for detail," Myra said. "Most visitors just take pictures or walk past. They miss what the desert is really telling them." Nico smiled, feeling encouraged. "I like to notice small things. They often tell the biggest stories." Myra's eyes sparkled with interest. She liked that he cared about the little details, the same details that kept her safe in the desert. She felt a strange warmth, realizing this stranger shared her respect for the land. They climbed higher along the cliffs, carefully stepping over loose rocks. The wind grew stronger, whipping Nico's hair across his face and tugging at his backpack. Myra stayed close, guiding him with a steady hand when paths became tricky. At one point, a small rock slide blocked their way. Nico froze, unsure how to move safely. Myra calmly held out her hand. "Trust me," she said. "Step here, and then there. Keep your weight low. You'll be fine." With Myra's guidance, Nico moved carefully, feeling his heart race but also trusting her completely. Once they reached solid ground, he exhaled with relief. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Myra smiled, a small blush on her cheeks. "The desert is full of surprises. You just need someone to show you the safest way." After hours of climbing and exploring, they found a small plateau with a breathtaking view of the desert stretching into the horizon. The sun was high now, making the sand shimmer like gold. Nico pulled out his notebook and began sketching the scene, while Myra watched silently. She loved seeing him so absorbed in his work, his eyes filled with wonder. "You really see the world differently," she said softly. "It's nice to notice the beauty that others miss." Nico looked up, meeting her gaze. I think it's easier to see it when someone shows you what to look for, he replied, smiling. The corners of Myra's lips lifted, and for a moment, a comfortable silence wrapped around them. As the sun began to descend toward the horizon, painting the sky with orange and pink, they decided to rest near a small rock formation that offered shade. Myra unpacked some dried fruits and water, sharing them with Nico. They sat close, not because they needed to, but because the proximity felt natural. "Do you come here often?" Nico asked, breaking the quiet. "Almost every week," Myra said. "I know these cliffs well. The desert teaches patience and respect. You learn to move carefully and to notice what others ignore." Nico nodded thoughtfully. "I can see why. It feels like every rock, every shadow has a story." Myra glanced at him, noticing the way his eyes lit up with curiosity and enthusiasm. There was something refreshing about his presence, a mixture of bravery and kindness. She realized she wanted to share more of the desert with him, not just its landscapes, but its secrets, its quiet wonders. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the sand, Nico and Myra began their journey back to the camp. The desert was changing colors, turning from gold to soft orange, and finally to dusky purple. The cliffs seemed to glow, their edges sharp and magnificent. Walking side by side, they felt a growing connection, a mix of trust, admiration, and something warmer, harder to define. By the time they reached the camp, the first stars were beginning to appear. Myra helped Nico gather firewood while he admired the sky above. The desert night had a calm magic, filled with quiet sounds and soft light. Sitting near the fire once more, they shared stories from their childhoods, their dreams, and their hopes for the future. Words were light, but their eyes and gestures spoke volumes. The desert night wrapped them in quiet wonder, and both Nico and Myra felt that this first day of exploration was only the beginning, not just of an adventure in the desert, but of something deeper, something growing between them like the steady warmth of a small fire. The next morning, the desert greeted Nico and Myra with a bright, warm light that made the cliffs glow in shades of gold and amber. Nico stretched and breathed deeply, feeling the dry, crisp air fill his lungs. Today, Myra had promised to take him further along the cliffs, to explore areas few outsiders ever saw. The excitement in Nico's chest made his steps quick and light. "Be careful today," Myra said as she adjusted the strap of her satchel. "Some paths are tricky, and the wind can change quickly." Nico nodded, trusting her guidance. "I'll follow your lead." They began their climb, stepping over small rocks and carefully navigating narrow ledges. The cliffs rose higher, offering breathtaking views of the desert below. From this height, the desert seemed endless, stretching in soft waves of gold and orange. Nico paused often to sketch the cliffs, taking notes about the patterns of the rocks and the plants that clung to the edges. Myra walked beside him, pointing out details that Nico might have missed. "See these marks on the rock," she said, touching a smooth line carved by wind and sand over centuries. "They tell the story of how the cliffs change with time." Nico leaned closer, fascinated. "It's amazing. Every line feels like a message from the desert itself." As they moved along the ledges, a sudden rumble made Nico's heart jump. Small rocks tumbled down from above, forming a tiny rock slide that blocked their path. He froze, unsure where to step. Myra's hand found his, steadying him. "Trust me," she said calmly. "Step here, and then there. Keep your weight low and slow. You'll be fine." Nico followed her instructions carefully. Each movement required focus, but Myra's confidence and guidance made him feel safe. When they reached solid ground, he let out a deep breath. I don't know what I would have done without you, he admitted. Myra smiled gently, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The desert is full of surprises. You just need someone to show you the safest way. After the rock slide, they found a small plateau that overlooked the desert, bathed in bright sunlight. Nico knelt to study a group of desert plants clinging to the cliff's edge. Myra watched quietly, appreciating his curiosity and care. There was something about him, his determination, his kindness, that made her feel at ease, even in the harsh desert environment. Why do you explore? Myra asked softly. Most people wouldn't come here without reason. Nico looked up, shading his eyes from the sun. I want to understand the world. To see beauty in places most people ignore. And I like learning from people who know it better than I do, he added, glancing at Myra with a small, shy smile. She felt a warmth in her chest at his words. It was rare for someone to truly notice the desert, to respect it instead of just seeing it as a challenge. Then you're learning well, she said. And maybe teaching me a little too, about how you see the world. As the day passed, the desert seemed to test them. Sudden gusts of wind pushed against them as they climbed higher. Loose rocks made every step uncertain. Yet, with each obstacle, their teamwork strengthened. Nico began to anticipate Myra's movements, and Myra noticed his growing confidence and courage. Together, they moved as if connected, two explorers against the vastness of the desert. By late afternoon, they reached a ledge that offered a view unlike any other. The sun was beginning its descent, casting a golden glow over the cliffs and the desert beyond. Nico set up his sketchbook, capturing the moment in careful lines and colors. Myra stood beside him, the wind tugging at her clothes and hair. You've made a beautiful drawing, she said quietly, watching him work. It's nothing compared to this, Nico replied, gesturing at the desert. It feels alive, like it's trying to tell a story. Myra smiled, feeling a quiet connection she couldn't fully explain. The cliffs, the wind, and the desert seemed to mirror the growing bond between them, strong, alive, and full of energy. As the sun sank lower, they built a small fire near the edge of the cliff. The flames flickered in the soft evening light, casting warm shadows on their faces. Sitting close, they shared quiet laughter and small stories, letting the desert and the fire hold the rest of the world away. Nico felt a calm he hadn't known in cities or forests. And Myra realized that, for the first time, she wanted someone to see the desert not only through her eyes but through theirs together. As the fire crackled and the cliffs glowed at dusk, both of them felt that today had changed something that could grow like the fire itself, warm and steady, against the vastness of the desert. The desert night settled quietly over the cliffs. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in deep shades of purple and soft pink. The fire Nico and Myra had built flickered gently, sending warm light dancing across the rocks. The desert, which had felt harsh and wide during the day, now seemed calm and full of secrets. Nico sat near the fire, sketchbook resting on his knees. His eyes kept drifting to Myra, who was arranging small stones to protect the fire from the wind. There was something peaceful about the way she moved, careful yet confident, completely at ease in this wild place. He admired her skill and calmness, wishing he could understand the desert as she did. Do you like the desert at night? Nico asked softly, trying not to disturb the quiet magic around them. Myra looked up and smiled. I do. The desert has a different voice at night. It is softer, quieter, but still full of life. You can hear things during the night that you might miss during the day. Nico nodded, looking out at the cliffs. The wind whispered through the rocks, carrying faint sounds from far away, the rustle of small animals, the movement of sand over stones, and the occasional call of a distant bird. The night made the desert feel alive in ways he had never imagined. "Do you have stories about this place?" Nico asked, curiosity bright in his eyes. Myra nodded and sat down beside him. "Many," she said. "Long ago, people lived near these cliffs. They watched the stars, learned from the desert, and respected every plant and rock. There are caves with paintings that tell stories of the animals, the wind, and the sun. The cliffs have seen generations of people and the changing desert." Nico leaned closer, fascinated. "I would love to see those stories, someday." Myra smiled softly. "Maybe you will, if you return. The desert rewards patience. You learn slowly, but the lessons stay with you." For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire flicker and listening to the desert night. Nico felt a sense of calm he rarely experienced in cities or forests. The stars above were countless, twinkling like tiny flames of their own. Myra noticed the way his eyes reflected the firelight, the way his lips curved slightly in thought, and felt a warmth she could not explain. "I've always loved nights like this," Myra said quietly. "It feels like the world is holding its breath, giving you a moment to see things clearly." Nico looked at her, feeling a sudden closeness. "I think I understand now. The desert, it's not just a place. It's a teacher. And being here with someone who knows it, makes it even more special." Myra's heart skipped a beat. She was not used to sharing her feelings so openly, yet something about Nico made it natural. She looked at the cliffs, glowing faintly in the moonlight, and felt a quiet happiness. They began to talk about their lives, their dreams, and the things that had led them to this moment. Nico spoke of faraway cities and the libraries he loved, places where people lived surrounded by books and history. Myra told him about her life in the desert, about the animals she had learned to track, and the hidden water sources she knew. They shared small laughs, discovering similarities despite the differences in their worlds. As the night deepened, the wind grew cooler, and the fire's warmth became more comforting. Nico moved a little closer to Myra without thinking. She noticed, and a small smile played on her lips. Their hands brushed as they passed a water bottle back and forth. Neither pulled away, both aware of the quiet connection growing stronger with every shared glance and word. The desert around them seemed to watch silently. The cliffs, the stars, the gentle flicker of the fire all felt like witnesses to the beginning of something new. For Nico, the desert was no longer just a place to study or explore. It was a place of wonder, mystery, and connection. For Myra, the newcomer was no longer just another traveler. He was someone who appreciated the desert in the same way she did, someone whose presence felt warm and steady. Hours passed, yet neither wanted to leave the quiet of the night. Finally, Myra leaned back on her hands, looking up at the stars. Nico followed her gaze, and together they sat, side by side, letting the desert night hold them in its calm embrace. In the soft glow of the fire and the quiet beauty of the cliffs, both felt a sense of trust and closeness that was rare and precious. The desert had tested them, guided them, and now it was giving them a moment of peace, a chance to understand not only the land, but also each other. And as the fire crackled and the stars shone above, both Nico and Myra knew that this night, filled with stories, laughter, and quiet glances, would be remembered long after the desert day returned. The desert morning was bright but calm. Nico woke to the soft warmth of the sun on his face. Last night's fire had burned low, leaving a few glowing embers behind. Myra was already awake, moving quietly among the rocks, checking their small camp. She had a careful routine, one that had kept her safe in the desert for years. "Good morning," Nico called softly, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Good morning," Myra replied with a smile. "The desert is calm today. A good day for exploring, but be ready for surprises." Nico nodded, excitement shining in his eyes. "I'm ready." After a quick breakfast of dried fruits and water, they packed up the camp and began moving along a narrow canyon path that Myra knew well. The cliffs rose sharply on either side, casting long shadows over the sandy floor. Nico felt a thrill with every step. The desert had a way of making him feel alive, alert, and full of curiosity. As they climbed a small ridge, Myra suddenly stopped and raised a hand. "Watch your step here," she warned. Nico slowed immediately, noticing the loose rocks that could shift under his weight. He stepped carefully, trusting Myra's experience. "I don't know how you move so easily," Nico said, a mix of admiration and amazement in his voice. "I feel like I'm constantly afraid of slipping." Myra laughed softly. "You learn to feel the rocks and sand under your feet. The desert teaches you patience and attention. Fear is natural, but it can be controlled with care." They continued along the cliffs, discovering small plants clinging to the rocks and hidden pools of water that shimmered in the sunlight. Nico sketched eagerly, jotting notes and making careful observations. Myra watched him, noticing how his eyes lit up with every discovery. There was something pure in his curiosity, something that made the desert feel even more alive. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind swept through the canyon. Nico's balance faltered, and a small rock gave way under his foot. He stumbled, and his heart raced with fear. Myra's hand shot out instantly, catching him before he could fall. "Careful," she said, steadying him. "The cliffs can be tricky. One wrong step, and you could get hurt." Nico took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline rush through him. "Thank you," he said sincerely. I I don't know what I would do without you." Myra's heart warmed. "That's why I'm here. You don't have to face the desert alone." They paused for a moment, catching their breath and letting the wind die down. Nico looked at Myra, noticing the calm confidence in her eyes and the way her presence made him feel safe. He realized how much he trusted her, not just for guidance, but in ways he had never felt before. As the day wore on, they came to a small ledge that overlooked a wide stretch of desert. The sun was high, casting golden light over the cliffs and sand below. Myra pointed out the patterns in the rocks, explaining how wind and water shaped them over centuries. Nico listened intently, feeling a growing admiration for her knowledge and experience. They decided to rest and have some water. Sitting near the edge of the ledge, Nico passed Myra a small bottle. Their hands brushed, and for a moment, neither moved away. The touch was brief, but it carried a silent understanding, a bond that had grown through shared challenges and trust. "The desert is amazing," Nico said softly, his eyes on the horizon. "It's dangerous, but beautiful. And, being here with someone who knows it, makes it feel different. Better." Myra smiled, feeling her cheeks warm. "I'm glad you feel that way. Most people only see the desert as harsh or empty. Few notice its life, its stories, or its beauty." As the sun began to lower, painting the cliffs with soft orange light, Nico and Myra decided to set up a small fire near the ledge. The flames flickered gently, and the wind carried the scent of warm sand and dry wood. They sat close, sharing small laughs, comparing sketches, and telling short stories from their lives. The fire was comforting, but the real warmth came from their growing trust and companionship. For Nico, the desert was no longer just a place to explore or study. It had become a place of wonder, learning, and connection. And for Myra, the newcomer was no longer just another traveler. He had become someone she respected, admired, and quietly cared for. As night began to fall, they watched the desert transform once again. Shadows stretched long across the cliffs, and the sky deepened to shades of violet and blue. The fire's glow reflected on their faces, and both felt a sense of calm and closeness that was rare and precious. The desert had tested them, guided them, and now it had given them a moment of peace, a moment to feel not only the land around them but also the bond they had built. And as the embers of their fire glowed softly, Nico and Myra knew that this day, with its challenges, laughter, and quiet trust, would remain with them long after they left the cliffs. The morning sun stretched across the desert, turning the cliffs a bright, golden color. Nico and Myra packed up their small camp quickly, eager for another day of exploration. Today, Myra planned to take Nico to a hidden part of the cliffs that few had ever seen. The path was steep and narrow, but the reward at the top was said to be breathtaking. "Stay close to me," Myra said, her voice calm but firm. "This path requires careful steps. The rocks are loose, and the wind can be strong." Nico nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I'll be careful." They began climbing, moving slowly along the rugged trail. The desert stretched endlessly below them, a mixture of gold, orange, and brown. Nico's notebook was tucked securely in his backpack, but he kept glancing around, sketching mental images of the cliffs and desert patterns. Myra moved with ease, her confidence and skill evident in every careful step. As they reached a particularly narrow ledge, Nico misjudged his footing and slipped slightly. His heart raced, and he caught himself on a nearby rock, but the ledge beneath him crumbled. Myra reacted instantly, grabbing his arm and pulling him back to safety. "Hold on tightly," she instructed, keeping her own balance steady. "One wrong move here could be dangerous." Nico's pulse pounded in his ears. "Thank you," he said, his voice shaking. I don't know what I would have done without you." Myra's hand lingered for a moment, steadying him, and she smiled softly. "The desert teaches you to trust the people who know it. And now you know you can trust me." They paused on a small, stable section of the cliff, catching their breath. Nico's gaze met Myra's, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. The trust, relief, and admiration between them filled the space more than speech ever could. As they continued, the cliff opened into a hidden plateau, surrounded by jagged rocks and rare desert plants. A small pool of clear water reflected the sky, and delicate flowers clung to the edges of the rocks. Nico's eyes widened with wonder. This is incredible," he whispered, kneeling to study a small bloom. "I've never seen anything like it." Myra smiled, proud of the hidden beauty she had protected for years. "Few people ever find this place," she said. "It's one of the desert's secrets. You have to move carefully, observe closely, and respect it." Nico carefully sketched the plants and rocks, asking Myra questions about each one. She explained the patterns of growth, the way the water collected in the pool, and how the wind shaped the cliffs. He listened intently, absorbing every word. There was a connection growing between them, one built on shared curiosity, trust, and admiration. As the sun began to lower, the golden light painted the cliffs in a warm glow. Nico and Myra sat near the edge of the plateau, enjoying the quiet and the view. The desert stretched endlessly below them, alive with color and shadow. "You've shown me so much," Nico said softly, turning to Myra. "I feel like I understand the desert better already, and not just the desert. I feel like I understand a little about patience and care too." Myra's cheeks warmed, and she looked down at the rocks. "And I've learned something too," she admitted. "You notice things most people miss. You see beauty in details, in small moments. It makes the desert feel different." For a long moment, they simply watched the light fade over the cliffs. The wind carried a gentle coolness, rustling the sparse plants around them. Nico reached out to adjust his sketchbook, and their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. The small contact carried a quiet meaning, a silent acknowledgement of the closeness they both felt. As dusk approached, Myra helped Nico start a small fire near the plateau. The flames flickered against the rocks, casting soft shadows across their faces. Sitting close together, they shared quiet laughter and talked about small memories from their pasts. Nico spoke of cities and books, Myra shared her adventures in the desert. The differences between them seemed less important than the bond that had grown through shared experience, trust, and wonder. The desert night slowly arrived, stars appearing above them, countless and brilliant. The cliffs glowed faintly in the soft light, and the fire cast a golden reflection on the sand. Nico and Myra sat side by side, comfortable and quiet, letting the desert embrace them. In that moment, both realized that the connection between them had grown stronger than either expected, a bond that could not be broken by the vastness or challenges of the desert. The hidden plateau, the fire, and the desert cliffs at dusk had become more than a place. They were a witness to something rare and precious, a friendship blossoming into trust, admiration, and something deeper, quietly burning like the fire before them. The last day of their journey arrived with a calm sunrise that painted the cliffs in soft gold. Nico and Myra packed up their camp slowly, savoring the quiet moments. They knew today would be special, a chance to climb to the very edge of the desert cliff, a place Myra reserved only for those who truly respected the land. "Are you ready?" Myra asked, adjusting her satchel. Nico nodded, a mixture of excitement and a hint of nervousness in his eyes. "Yes. Let's see it together." They climbed steadily, carefully following narrow paths lined with loose rocks. The wind was gentler today, carrying the warm scent of sand and distant desert flowers. The desert stretched endlessly beneath them, waves of gold and orange fading into the horizon. Every step reminded Nico how much he trusted Myra. Her confidence and calm presence made even the most dangerous paths feel safe. As they approached the final stretch, the path became steeper. Nico's heart raced as he carefully placed each foot on the rocks. Myra walked close, steadying him when the ledge narrowed. "Almost there," she said softly, her voice calm like a guiding anchor. Finally, they reached the edge of the cliff. The view was breathtaking, an endless desert bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. The cliffs below were sharp and magnificent, the sand glowing warmly in the sun. A gentle wind stirred around them, carrying whispers of the desert's secrets. Nico felt a thrill, not just from the view, but from the journey itself, and the companionship he had found. Myra set down a small bundle of supplies and began arranging stones for a fire. Nico helped, and soon a small flame flickered, warm and steady against the approaching evening chill. They sat together on the edge, legs dangling slightly over the cliff, letting the vastness of the desert surround them. "This place, it's incredible," Nico said quietly, watching the sun cast long shadows across the sand. "I've never felt anything like it." Myra smiled, her eyes reflecting the golden light. It is special. Few ever reach it. It's the desert's gift to those who take care and move with respect. For a while, they simply watched the desert, letting the silence speak for them. Then Nico reached for his notebook, not to sketch, but to show Myra his thoughts. He had filled pages with careful observations, sketches of plants, rocks, and the cliffs, but also notes about what he felt: the trust, the excitement, and the quiet joy of sharing this adventure with her. "You've seen the desert in a way few people do," Myra said softly, glancing at the pages. "And you've seen it with care. That is what makes it alive." Nico looked at her, meeting her gaze. "And I've seen more than just the desert," he said, his voice steady. "I've seen someone who understands it, someone I trust completely." Myra felt her heart warm. There was a quiet strength in his words, and a softness that made the desert feel even more alive. For a moment, the cliffs, the fire, and the endless horizon were witnesses to something rare: a trust and connection that had grown slowly, patiently, and surely. The sun began to dip lower, casting brilliant orange and red hues across the cliffs. Nico and Myra leaned closer, their shoulders touching slightly. The fire crackled, casting warm light across their faces. Words were not needed, the bond they shared was already clear. Their hands brushed as they passed a small piece of fruit, and neither moved away. It was natural, easy, and full of meaning. "I'm glad we came here together," Myra said softly, her eyes on the horizon. "Me too," Nico replied. "I've learned so much, about the desert, about patience, and about trust. And about someone who makes even the vast desert feel safe and alive." The final light of the sun sank behind the cliffs, leaving the desert in shades of deep gold and purple. The fire continued to flicker, its warm glow reflecting on the rocks and the two of them. They sat in quiet contentment, sharing a smile, letting the silence and the desert night hold them. For Nico, the desert was no longer just a place of study or adventure. It was a place of wonder, connection, and the memory of trust built through shared experience. For Myra, Nico was no longer just a visitor. He was someone who had proven patience, respect, and care: the kind of person worth sharing the desert's secrets with. As the stars appeared above, countless and bright, Nico and Myra knew this moment on the desert cliff at dusk would remain with them forever. The fire, the cliffs, the desert, and their shared journey had created a bond that was quiet, strong, and enduring. And as they sat together, the warmth of the flames and the desert around them, both felt a deep sense of peace, gratitude, and a connection that would continue to grow, long after the sun rose again. The desert night wrapped them in calm and wonder, a perfect ending to an unforgettable adventure, and the beginning of a bond that neither the cliffs nor time could ever fade.